Okay, everybody, welcome back to your crisis coach with the amazing, the great, the fearless, the good looking, the handsome, the I'm out of adjectives, I'm out of verbs.
How
Scott,
much can you bullshit your friends here, huh?
I know, Scott H. Silverman. How are you today, Mr. Scott?
Oh my goodness. I'm on day week 2, of one of those GLP-1 shots. So, the cravings diminishing, but sleep's changed and eating habits have shifted dramatically. So, I've had a few mood swings, nothing too horrific, but it's fun to do that. Holidays are coming. We got a busy week in front of us. My youngest is flying out from New York, so we're going to be together as a family over the holidays. And otherwise, we've had some weather here in San Diego, and my colleagues at Soap, we couldn't get them wrangled together to come today. So it's just me and you, Fred. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm still working hard. Got monetized on the YouTube channel finally,
By
which
the
is
way, when
a
you say it like that, it sounds like somebody came and removed one of your arms. So you may want to explain that to people that don't understand what that means.
so monetization is when you get paid for views.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come directly out of the consumer's pocket necessarily. It's all built around YouTube is owned by Google, and it's all built around Google ads. So those sometimes annoying ads that you see on YouTube channels are what I get paid from. So I get you know how on YouTube, Scott, you could be a premium member and not get the ads? You familiar with that? There's an option you could pay. It's like $12 a month to be a member, and
Yeah.
you get some benefits. And one of the benefits is there's no ads. Well, let's say there's, just for a number's sake, say there's 10 million of those people. I still get a piece of their $12 because I can't get any ad money off it. So I get a piece of that every month guaranteed, and I get the added bonus of a pre-roll. It's called a pre-roll, a mid-roll, and an end roll. And that's a commercial before, a commercial in the middle, and a commercial at the end. If you watch that commercial, which you tend to watch the middle one, obviously, more than anything, if you watch it, I get more, because you watched it. And that's all based off of, say, Nike or whoever it is that is paying for the click. So
Got it.
it's a huge accomplishment, though. Huge for me. Not important to everybody, obviously, but important to me because it's what my goal was. It's a goal. It was the beginning goal. I'm on the ground floor. I'm not going to be a millionaire. I'm not going to be wealthy from it, but I have the opportunity to be wealthy from it. There's people on there making millions of dollars a year on YouTube, so
So
it's
what is your primary content on that platform that's gotten you this many viewers and the opportunity to monetize?
so because it's a rock history documentary style that I do, a lot of it is based around people in my age range to your age range. And a lot of it is built on remembering the good old days, of when we were cruising in our Camaro or driving with our buddies or going out to have a few beers or to a concert. So a lot of it is nostalgic based around music. So, but I could tell you most recently, I learned a lesson too in it because this is a business, not a hobby. That's the difference. I'm in business now. It's an LLC. It's built around insurances and there's cost involved on my end. My job is to give you what you want to see. YouTube doesn't care if I'm happy. YouTube doesn't care if I just cured cancer. They care how many people watched. So, did I create a good cover, like your book cover? Did I create a good cover to attract people? Is the titling? That's why we get clickbait so much, because YouTube forces us into clickbait. They want me to write Rock is dead, even though the video has nothing to do with Rock is dead. they want me to write that and recommend I write that because they want Scott to go, ooh, Rock is dead. I disagree. Let me see what this clown's got to say. And you click on it. The minute you click on it, they're satisfied from their advertising side. Because now their advertisers say, hey, look, you advertised and somebody clicked. And they leave the rest up to fate. But it's an interesting thing. So I learned a lesson on last Wednesday. I needed a video, and I put a video out on 1980 to 89 punk hardcore music. I'm not a punk hardcore music guy. I'm familiar with it. I went to a few shows as a kid, but I was young. It wasn't my style. So it was just a throwaway. Well, that throwaway just put me over the mark because it's my biggest video to date. And it's something I didn't even have, let's say, my heart and soul involved in. So it's interesting.
You didn't really have to be a subject matter expert. You just had to put it together in a way that attracted individuals to come on and click, correct?
Right. Give them, basically what I'm learning is give them what they want. So now, like I told you, I'm not a big punk hardcore guy, but I succeeded with it. So now my next video on Wednesday has to involve punk and hardcore again. You want to feed the beast. You don't run away from the beast, you feed the beast. So it's very much YouTube not caring if Fred Carroll is happy. They care if YouTube's happy and the listener is happy. And if I could feed the beast more, my numbers go up. And it's very compounding. Hopefully 1,000 people watch that video and 200 of them say, hey, let me watch the next one. And then 50 of them say, let me watch a third. And then 20 of them say, let me watch a fourth. And then you compound and consistency.
So are you weaving in the other social media platforms like for, I would assume for that demographic, Instagram and TikTok and
a lot of TikTok, not a lot of Instagram. Instagram's not great for me. Facebook posts and stuff. But, another thing I learned is subscribers don't matter. Like you and I don't have a large subscriber share point. But you don't have to be a subscriber to see you and me on your crisis coach. And subscribers aren't as important. Let's just say you go and you beg your daughters and your wife to follow this channel. That's 3 people. But if they don't watch the video, YouTube doesn't care about them. They'll present it to them, but if they don't click it, they're actually a detriment to the channel, not a positive. Because we need people to watch our show, not just subscribe to it. Subscribing does us.
Watch and spend some time with it because it's interesting. All the podcasters that I see, that I'm seeing, a lot of political ones out there today, independent, perspectives. First thing they do in the first 30 seconds is ask people to subscribe. What I think the thinking would be, if somebody subscribes, you have them in your database. Once you have them in your database, you can keep poking them until eventually they either unsubscribe or they start looking, which is another way of going fishing, I would assume, for people spending time on your platform.
Right. But say me and you today, say there's no political talk, so nobody knows our political views. And they say, hey, these 2 guys are interesting. Okay. So they subscribe. Now, next week, you bring up a negative about Trump and they happen to be a big Trump person. Now they unsubscribe. It's very week to week. That's why you and I focus. We tend to of course, politics comes into play because politics plays a big role in mental health and addiction recovery in both our instances. We believe that law could play some of the role, but it's not the point of our show. We're more than that. I'm sure if you ask Scott H. Silverman, is he going to take care of the guy struggling who's a right-wing guy and a left-wing guy, you're going to treat them the same. You're there. Your goal is to treat them, help them, not their political stance. Regardless of yours. You don't care. You don't care if they're black, yellow, red, green, or white. You don't care if they're left or right leaning. You care that they're the best version of themselves.
Yeah. The only thing that I care about that politics seem to do is they seem to get in their own way around trying to find ways to help people. I mean, it's just it is what it is. And just listening this morning, pivoting for a second, Trump has now said, go ahead and release all the files. It's like, wait, what? After
Yeah, it's
all this fighting.
confusing.
And I think that, people finally said, look, it's coming out anyway. You might as well look like, you're the architect of having it come out than somebody who keeps saying don't, and God forbid you're in there. But my sense would be the highlighters that, headliners that come out, there's going to be a lot of them from everything you keep seeing. It's not going to be, and it's not a political thing. It's a matter of, these, victims getting their truth out. And then the people who were participating in the activity answer for their actions.
Yeah,
And,
the only mistake you just made is you said it's not a political thing. What you mean is it shouldn't be a political
shouldn't be
thing.
correct.
It is a political thing because people are making it a political thing, and so are the politics.
Well, but I think it's being made political for false reasons. I mean, the truth's come. This is too big for one party to find a way to put it under the carpet. There's just no
Yeah,
way.
there's
I
too
mean,
many guilty. Listen, we're going to see tons of Democrats are going to be on that list, and tons of Republicans. There's going to be a shocker on that list. There's going to be somebody you thought was on the list, and that may be Trump. That isn't. But let's leave it up to that. Let's see it and say, if you say you're not guilty, okay, show me you're not guilty. Just show it to us.
or get out of the way so we can determine based on the facts whether you had some level of participation, whether it's covering up or because people don't seem to trust government anyway, and haven't. A certain percentage haven't, and it's gotten a lot worse. And I don't know how we're going to fix things if we don't, considering they get the assets to do the stewardship to what takes place or doesn't take place.
I think the
Anyway,
best.
so let me pivot back to
Yeah.
the excitement for you and your monetization. That's really cool. So you're going to have one of those plaques that you see in people's backgrounds soon.
Wow, that would be a dream. That would be beautiful.
What is
But
that,
I
like
mean,
100,000 mark or something? Is that what that is? The first one?
yeah, and there's a lot of things that go into it that are, me and my friends were talking about it the other day privately, how weird it is. Because if you look at my number, so 2.8 million people have viewed my videos on that channel in the last 10 months. And
That's a quarter million a month. I mean, that's incredible.
That's a lot of people who have seen this face. And of course, the jokes go around at that point of what people are doing watching my videos and stuff, and who it is watching my videos. It's quite possible President Trump has scrolled past one of my videos. You just don't know who these people are. And it kind of awakens you to what it must feel. Imagine when you're Brad Pitt. Imagine when you're those people, why they react the way they do. Because when a complete stranger recognizes you from something and you don't know them, it's got some alarm bells go off. It's unique. 2.8 million is nothing in general. But for me, it's definitely something because I am a no one.
Well, maybe not for the top 5%, but to get close to that how many people don't even have 2,000 views a year? I mean, I just watched a guy today because I'm looking at new ways to eat food, talking about oatmeal. He's pretty passionate about it. He's lost 100 pounds this last year, and he was pretty excited about his oatmeal and how he prepares it the night before for 4 days and has it as a snack. And it's informative, but gee whiz, it's amazing what's given some people. So I think that I'm proud of you, man. I'm excited for
Well,
you.
thanks.
It's gonna be
It
great.
is life altering. There is a life altering aspect, and it just steamrolls from past all the way up through my 56 years. So I've never been good at giving me my credit like an attaboy and stuff, and not in
Yeah.
a cocky way. I know how hard I worked to make this thing something because my back was against the wall. I made the choice to leave my job to focus on this. Not a lot of people make that move. It's a scary move to make, and it's still scary. I still don't have income coming in, but there's plenty of money going out. But it's the first thing in my life, and I've written 17 books that I'm proud of reaching. So I was never good with the books. I was, they could have been better. They didn't sell all the negatives. I focused on the negatives. So this, I'm more positive focused with, okay, hard work matters. It does pay off on YouTube. And there's a reason a lot of people can't succeed. There's a reason our show doesn't succeed. We're not successful on YouTube. We don't get a ton of views. Sometimes we get 10, sometimes we get 1,000. There's a reason. It's finding that reason. And it takes time to find that reason. It takes time to build trust. We're not in a niche. We're in a very niche category where people looking for Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt aren't finding us based off those looks. We're not in entertainment, even though I think we are entertaining, and
Well,
we're not.
now you're a subject matter expert. I mean, the internet has told you that you've achieved some goals. You may find, that once you're at a certain level, anything that you touch and influence as an influencer, you can then point to what we're doing here. Then there's all kinds of things I see: monetizing your books, your subject matter expertise, the fact that you've changed your career from full-time dependency to full-time independency. And based on what you shared with me earlier, another 10 months, you should be able to make 2 times what you're making, if not more. And then as you learn more about how to monetize, and then you get sponsors and, different people.
You need different streams of money coming in, yes. But there's opportunity. So as I build a channel, or anybody out there building a channel, first of all, giving up will get you nowhere. Quitting on it, if it's something you enjoy as a hobby, you might as well keep going with it. Upload your videos, learn from your mistakes and fix those mistakes. If people in the comments are telling you you're wrong, don't fight with them. That's another thing I learned. Don't argue with them. Take their criticism as much as you possibly can without it being rude, and build off of that. If they're telling you, well, you missed this band, and this band, well, go produce a video with this band, and this band. And then maybe the next person says, well, that's not true. There's always people out there, but I'm getting much better at balancing. Let's say I get 1,000 comments. That's a normal video for me, 1,000 comments. 150 of them are rock on. Hey, this is awesome. Oh, I remember. Sometimes they're paragraphs of stories I have to read of, I was with my buddy in New Jersey. I remember very flashback nostalgic. And then there's that one guy that says, you suck. Your voice is trash. Your left eye is lazy. All things I'm aware of already, and unfortunately, those are the things that stick with you, the negative bonds. But then you realize something's wrong with them. Something's wrong with them, that they had to take the time to beat you down to feel better. And maybe you did them a service in that way.
And if you're not getting out there, you're not going to get that kind of comment. And some people, because of social media, it's the only way they've been able to talk to other people, because they're either homebound, or they're personality less, or they have no way of interacting with human beings on a social level. So places like Nextdoor and a few others, the neighborhood stuff. I mean, I saw something today. This parent decided, my daughter just called me, and there's a major problem on Highway 5. Okay. It's like, the news is there for a reason, but we thank you for giving us that update, and we won't go on Highway 5 assuming that we're reading what you're saying about what your daughter said on the freeway. It's like, really? Go feed the cat. Go feed the cat.
Yeah. But ironically, YouTube rewards me, meaning me, for these negative comments, because it's engagement. Any engagement on YouTube is a huge machine. It's the most watched. It is the most watched thing over TV and everything. More people watch YouTube than anything. Of course, the phones have created that, but a lot of mine is watched on a TV, on my YouTube channel. I could see all those analytics. But when somebody argues with me and I answer back and they respond, and then I answer back and they respond, now I always negate them. So somebody that says something hateful, I'll say, well, I appreciate you watching the video, and leave it at that. If they continue to engage, I'll explain as much as I feel I need. But every time YouTube sees that, they say, wow, this is a video that people are interested in. Whether they're not reading what they're saying, but they are seeing engagement. And that's what they want, because they want that person to stay. That's why sharing a YouTube video on Facebook is a bad thing. It's not a good thing, because Facebook isn't owned by YouTube. Facebook doesn't want people leaving Facebook to go to YouTube. So that's why you put the video in the comments. You don't put it in the link, and stuff like that. So a lot of things you have to catch on to, and you either adapt to it or you die. In a metaphorical sense, your channel dies if you don't adapt to their structure.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that sounds like it's keeping you busy. I'm sure you're putting about an hour or so a day into that.
yeah, I'm down to about 14 hours a day, and it was at more like 16, but I started stepping away more. I don't start until later in the day. I used to start at 7 in the morning and do it till 10 at night. Now I don't even start sitting in my desk or computer until afternoon, because I get my housework done. I get my chores done. I go shopping. I go to the gym. I'll go for a walk, anything like that. I've allowed myself finally to do those things, because at first, when I left the real paycheck coming in, I felt guilty, like I had to work every minute of every day to make it worth it. And it's not true. I should enjoy myself.
That's what life's about. That's what life's about.
Yes, it is. So yeah, it is starting to get cold in Connecticut, which is great in the sense of, listen, it's the middle of November. It gets cold in Connecticut. For it to be in the 60s, 50s, 60s still, it's hard to complain here, because you could easily have inches of snow by now. So I'm quite happy. I'm happy with my life. I'm happy with my choices. And the rest is in the future. I'm not even worried about it. I don't worry about too far into the future like I used to.
Can't do much about it.
No. Well, you learn that. Unfortunately, you can't teach that, though. You can't teach that to the young kids. It's similar to you being a recovered addict. But when you were an addict, nobody could tell you, this is no good for you, because you had the world by the balls.
No, I was too busy trying to kill myself. I wouldn't let anybody intervene on that. And I thought I was happier than hell. By the way, I celebrated 41 years last Thursday, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Excellent. 41 years. 41 years. That's a long time. And you probably thought when you were 25, you said, I'm not going to live to be 65 anyway.
Oh, no, I was focused on 30. I figured when I made it to 30, and if had I not attempted suicide, I probably would have died if I was successful with my attempt, which I wasn't at 30. So
isn't that ironic?
I didn't think I could live past 30. Yeah.
It's so ironic that you owe this to wanting to die. Theoretically, it makes no sense.
And I'm not sure. I should pull back on that a little bit. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live. And the way I was living, and I didn't know how to pivot. I didn't know how to change directions. I just thought I was lost in my emotional abyss, and that I wasn't going to be able to get the right kind of help. And I didn't know I needed help, because I figured, well, hey, you're numb, you're not feeling stuff, you're doing just fine, you're working hard, you're making a living, but things were falling apart, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I assume it's the people you're around too at the same time. If they're doing the same exact thing you're doing, and then everything's fine. If everybody's doing cocaine, well, they're doing it's a party. Hey, yeah, but it's Tuesday at 1 in the morning. Don't you gotta go to work tomorrow? I'll be fine. Party on. It's at the same time, I appreciate that value, but the downfall of it is so dramatic and traumatic that you only see these things as you get older. Now how old are you now?
I am 71.
So 71. But in theory, 71 is not old anymore. It's not as old as it was when your parents were 71 and stuff. And I remember my grandmother I think she died at 65, and I don't have a memory of her not being an old lady. She was a old lady, retired at 62 and just watching soap operas and eating caramel candies and, the old lady stuff. And now, 65 for me is only 9 years away, and I feel like 20 at times. Not my body necessarily, because
And
I'll tell you this.
if you extrapolate the data, by the time you hit 65, you're actually potentially could be a millionaire.
Yeah.
If not sooner.
Yeah, let's make it sooner, please. Let's get it done sooner, and then I can come. I'll fly out on my jet to do live shows with you every Monday.
Or just fly me out to you. No, we'll go somewhere nice and warm like Hawaii or, maybe down to
I'll buy a house from your wife in your neighborhood, and that'll be my second home.
Yeah. And then we'll rent it out as sober living when you're not here and make some money.
Right, exactly. See, we got a plan all around my money and my success.
There you go.
But yeah, it's, the whole thing, life itself, being older versus being younger and remembering what I thought back then is kind of eye-opening when you reflect upon it. Your belief system at 20 versus 50, say, of what's old, what's unattainable. And you learn the patience through time. It's unfortunate that you learn it through time, because it would have been nice to have this kind of discipline and patience then to see where I am now.
You probably wouldn't have known what to do with it then. Things happen for a reason, brother.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm making better choices all around, from financial, mental, family. All those things are falling now. And that could be this show. It could be you. It's the circle I'm putting myself in. I'm allowing myself to be in a certain circle, and I'm not letting people in that don't belong in that circle anymore. Letting in the bad as often. Sometimes the wolf sneaks in, but I know how to get him out now.
Awesome.
Yeah, so overall, on your end of things with addiction and stuff, I assume that the data is not changing very much. The needle's not dropping. In fact, it's rising. Yet, the positive of that is the information is rising and the opportunity is rising for you to seek help. Not from a government standpoint, but overall, help is out there. But, give me a version of what you would tell somebody if I called you. Let's say I have an alcohol dependency. I'm in my 30s, got a wife, got 2 kids and 1 on the way, and I'm just wasting away. The wife contacted you, I'm submitting to it. So I'm not admitting it, but I'm trying to save what I got. What's the first thing you tell this person?
Well, that's a rather ideal situation. It's pretty uncommon. But the first thing I would say is, that being said, why don't we get you in the office and let's do an assessment and let's figure out what we don't know. I said, if you had a broken leg, you had diabetes, you had a heart murmur, you'd go see an expert. So come see an expert. If not us, we'll make a referral. But don't sit there at home and think you can manage this, because if we're on the phone talking, the odds are you haven't been able to, and that's not a judgment. You may have this disease. You may have underlying issues. You may have contributing factors. You may be taking medication that's contributing to this. So rather than try to figure it out on your own or on YouTube, let's get an expert and get an assessment started and figure out what next steps look like.
Okay, so say those next steps are moving positive. Now I'm still drinking because I can't stop, but now we're a week out. I've made those contacts and I've met with you. Now where do we go?
Well, if you have that assessment, You're going to get some feedback, and part of the feedback is going to be suggestions on alternate routes that you might want to take or look into. And the decision ultimately will be yours, but know that your best thinking got you here. So let's chat again in a couple of days and let's talk about what next steps look like. And then if they're a proactive individual therapist or someone like myself, we do that follow up. That follow up happens, if not with the direct individual, with the family, and then check in and see. Because what happens is once somebody has a little knowledge, it's kind of hard to hide in the rabbit hole. So that's the only thing you do. But ultimately, because this is a disease of denial, the average person doesn't think they have a problem. And they're going to see someone like me or a clinician or addiction specialist or a doctor or a therapist because someone they love said, you better do that. And so you really can teach that the one who loved them how to be a better navigator for the one that they love. So that's part of the whole addressing the family part.
So I assume the one-on-one, say I come to your office and I'm meeting with you, I would assume if I'm an addict, and it probably happens to you in real life most of the time, I'm drunk right then, right? I mean, I'm already drunk, but I drove myself there. What does Scott H. Silverman do? You know I drove myself there, but you also know I'm drunk.
You try to get a hold of a family member to come get them or have them take a Uber home.
But it's all, you're just recommending this stuff. You're not going to get on the phone and call Uber yourself, or?
Oh, no, we'll help facilitate that. If somebody comes in as that inebriated, they shouldn't be behind the wheel. That's potentially going to cause harm to themselves or someone else. We can intervene if we need to. Yeah,
And that's common.
it happens. I had a private meeting once with somebody who worked for the district attorney's office, and I came into my office early in those days, 7:00. And there was a car out front, and I didn't pay any attention to it because I figured it might have been a student from the night before, or there's somebody else working a building next door. Then I checked it about 10 minutes, and I saw somebody asleep behind the wheel, and that was my 8:00 appointment. They had driven there, and they passed out behind the wheel. So about 8:00, or no, 8:30, I waited, went out and woke them up. And, this is somebody who had a lot to lose, and they worked for the district attorney here in our community. And so a lawyer with a pretty important job. And he goes, I don't think I have a problem. I said, well, I had to come wake you up at 8:30. We had an 8:00 appointment. I got here at 7. So you've been in your car for an hour and a half. Did you come last night? And he couldn't remember. So it was good reflective thinking to kind of point out, maybe your way isn't working. So let's look at some options. So we did, and it worked out really well. But it took, he was still in my office till like noon. I said, let's get you a muffin, have some coffee, and because I didn't want to talk to somebody who couldn't comprehend, and I didn't want to ask him to come back again the next day, because then I'd feel like it could be his last day on earth. So it worked out really well, and he was very receptive and got the immediate help that he needed, and he kept his job. So I haven't talked to him since then, but I got an attaboy from his supervisor who referred him to me.
I mean, you deal with hundreds and hundreds and thousands at this point in your career of this. Is it difficult for you to, I mean, do you wake up some mornings and saying, I wonder what Gina's doing? Because you haven't heard from her in 20 years. I mean, does it happen?
Not usually. I mean, there may be an episode here somewhere, but I try to do everything I can to be present when I'm talking to somebody and let them know that, you've got my phone number. I'm available 24/7. I'm not going to answer the phone 24/7, but I'll get back to you. And I know that, look, part of the reason I wrote the book, You're Not God, that job is taken. And because I've been asked that question a lot, and you have to find ways in this industry of helping people, the business, even faith-based leaders, you have to set some really good boundaries and know that it's just because somebody wants you to fix them doesn't mean they want to be fixed, or they want to
have you ever introduced them into your life in the sense of, well, there's a few, like Jay Wiley is somebody, right, that you brought into your life on a different standing. But
well, in my old agency, 50% of my team were in recovery, on parole, on probation, off probation. So they were I would define as like-minded people. And half the staff we have now are veterans and people in recovery. I'm not necessarily a magnet for that, but I'm attracted to that. But it isn't a precursor, but it's a bonus, if you will, sometimes, because their level of lived experience when they're helping others is so much different than someone who hasn't been there. I mean, a professional will tell you it doesn't matter what's happened to somebody, I can help them. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because the person on the other side of the table, which is where I lived, doesn't necessarily trust very easily.
Yeah, it is ironic, from somebody that's a non-addict like myself that just has to take your word for it at times because I didn't live the experience. But of course, other things correlate to it. It doesn't have to be drug addiction or alcohol addiction just to be somebody that survived something. But I look at it as, I started this conversation telling you about doing cocaine Tuesday at 1 a.m. You're a good example of 41 years later, you're still paying for that Tuesday 1 a.m. You're still not paying for it, but
It's a memory.
you're still in recovery from that. I mean, you got a chip that said 41 years sober, and it's all because of that Tuesday 1 a.m. I mean, so one good hour of your
Yeah.
life, what you
Well,
thought was a good hour.
let me correct you. I never stopped at 1 a.m. It was usually around 4 or 5.
Yeah.
1
Did you even
1 a.m.
tell time?
I was just ramping up around 1 a.m. As a matter of fact, the day that my wife Michelle, when I'd left the house, came to get me, it was literally 4 a.m. in the morning. That's why I remember 4 a.m. And she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "You know what I'm doing here." She said, "You promised me you wouldn't come back here." And I said, "I don't remember saying that." And I don't remember saying, I was probably in a blackout. So to your point, though, part of the reason I believe that the social model of recovery really works is you're in meetings, you're listening to people, you call them peers, contemporaries, colleagues, if you will, in the recovery process, and you hear things that remind you on a daily basis, for me, what it used to be like. There was a guy in our meeting this morning, 2 weeks, somebody who had a 1 week, somebody who had 2 years, and they've been in the program 25 years and they've relapsed 9 or 10 times. And you hear that stuff and you go, I need to hear that, because that's how I get reminded. In most catastrophic events, cancer, emotional, divorce, loss of a child, loss of a parent, they all have support groups. So you're hearing from others what it's like. A, you're less alone. B, you have clear contemporized examples of why you don't want to go back to what it was like, and tools that are being shared and updated. And I don't spend maybe 2 hours a day on my recovery path. I mean, everything else I do is around it. I was spending 12, 14 hours a day chasing the dragon. To me, I get like 12 hours to practice self-care, do things like this, spend time with my family. So the gifts that I've gotten are significant and terrific. And,
Yeah, and I would say I won't say you don't deserve, but you don't fall into the percentage ranks. And I think this is more of a kudos to Michelle, your wife, than you, even though you probably get rewarded for it much more. She shouldn't even be there. Most women aren't still there. She had every right to leave you. Every reason and every right. And for some reason she didn't, regardless of you doing what you said you were going to do, or which is of course a testament to you. But you don't fall into a category that it must be under 1% of marriages last through this.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
interesting because we were told early on in when I was in treatment, early recovery, that 95% of people in recovery, their relationships will fail unless each one of you works a specific program for yourself first, and then combine what you've learned to work together with each other. Because it can be really, I changed a lot, good, bad, or indifferent. And so she had to make some adjustments. But we also had a history prior to my, falling on my face, so to speak. But you're right, it happens a lot. And you see it a lot with people in
But
recovery.
theoretically, getting back to that 4 a.m. let's Tuesday morning, you realistically shouldn't have a wife nor kids.
Or be alive.
And your choice to seek recovery and accept it, regardless of the situation that brought you there, gifted you those three, let's call them the three things: a wife and two daughters, because the daughters didn't exist during addiction, active addiction, and the wife stayed when she easily and probably deservingly deserved to walk away. But
Yeah.
so you don't fall into the normal category, but you do fall into the dream category of this is what it could happen to your life, which I think is a valuable lesson that, yeah, it can work out, but you have to put the work in, and you're still doing that 41 years later.
Well, because the things you've just described are important to me. If they weren't important to me, I wouldn't be doing it. You
Right.
know, Michelle, actually, my sponsor, who was with me at my meeting on Thursday, gave me my token, and he's been my sponsor for 41 years. And Michelle came to the meeting, and she had an opportunity to share. That was nice of her to do that on Zoom. So having that part of our relationship is important, and maintaining anything that's important to you is going to require some sacrifices, some work, and some contemporizing and updating and checking in. And if you don't, then it won't. It's pretty much that simple. So, I like to work smarter, not harder.
So before we end the show, or because we're at the end, when do you give up on somebody? And I don't mean, I know the easy answer is I don't give up. I'm never going to give up. But you've had to have guys in your office, like the fictional guy we created, who just did not respond. And there's other people out there that will respond. When do you give up?
Well, it's funny because I was going to say my position is I won't give up. But if you give up, I can't be in the circle with you. I can't be part of, I'm not going to be a passenger in your desire to do things the way you've been doing them when you clearly have shared, and we both know, and your family's told you that, and it's not going to get better on its own. And the downside is going to be jails, institutions, or death. So I don't know if I really, there's not a formal ceremony to disengage, because I maintain an open door unless someone is, and this happened a couple times, because I'm pretty public. So if somebody wants to try to, somebody actually did it recently, 2 years ago, went online and said some things, and then came to the meeting and said some things. And he got shut down pretty quickly by others. But, and I knew he was in relapse, and I knew he was drinking and using. And then 2 weeks later, I reached out to him and said, look, if you're that angry and you think you're that right, let's have a conversation. And he didn't want to. So that just confirmed for me where he was at. But if he were to call me today and say, hey, look, I apologize. I was inappropriate. I was out of hand, but I really need help. Will you help me? I wouldn't say no. If you require a lot.
Have you been fooled in the sense of, you really thought you had somebody on the path, and then you're driving down the street and you see them at a bar?
I'm sure I have been fooled, but here's the thing. I know how to lie, cheat, and manipulate like the best of them and the rest of them. So that's what gives me an advantage working with families, because I'm able to filter, the concept of their lips are moving, they're more than likely lying. And that's not a judgment call. That's just a tool that people use that are in a disease of denial, or if they're mentally depressed.
Your street experience. Well, I think that was an interesting conversation. I like the angle we took today with talking about that, because I don't think enough people understand that people like you are there for the help reasons, not the harm reason. You're not looking to throw them in jail. You're not looking for them to fail or a quick payout and stuff. So opportunities are there, but you want to give your phone number before we sign off?
I do. It's the holiday time, and some of us are going to get a little lonely. Some of us are going to go a little too far. So please, if you want to talk, you want to text, give me a buzz, 619-993-2738, or go on to my website, yourcrisiscoach.com. And, when you see our channels, subscribe, like, and make a comment. I want to get
Share,
monetized.
get involved,
Yeah.
Whether or not, and monetization be great for our channel because it would give us more
Opportunity.
more opportunity to use the resources that we desire for what this show is actually about. Neither of us are here for a living. This isn't our living, but it would be nice to have somebody that, after we're off the air, that we could say, okay, reach out to such, and, reach out to these 3 people that reached out to us and see if you can give them some resources.
Well, the vision, Fred, would be to have a producer, a third person, who, when someone sent something to us, we'd forward it to them, and they'd have the databases. And before the show's over, they'd be able to give them the top 4 or 5 resources in their community that they could make a phone call with, and then come back and talk to us a couple of weeks later about what it was like to pivot and save their
And
own life.
just to keep this in your mind, let's next Monday when we do the show again, so you could be prepared for it when we come. Let's explain to people, since Thanksgiving's coming, let's talk about how we react to people during Thanksgiving that we think have a problem. Let's talk about whether or not a problem is a problem on Thanksgiving, because it is a holiday. All the things I'm thinking of.
Oh, no. I've done this for years on TV and talk about how to be a family member who has somebody coming to the table they know is going to do what they've always done, and how to handle that. And for those who coming to the table, maybe hearing this, they can talk about.
Because I bet there's a time and place for everything, and sometimes that's not the right moment to approach it. And maybe we could help people with that. So this is your crisis coach with Scott H. Silverman, the silver-haired gentleman, and myself, Fred Carroll, the bald-headed gentleman, signing off. We're done, Scott. This is it. And if nobody has told you they love you, we love you, and we'll talk to you again next